You? One, two, three, four. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
it is now 6:31. We are live, recording and streaming, and we have a quorum, and all your microphones are live. I will turn on the rest of the microphones as the rest of the board shows up.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. I would like to thank our guests for joining us today and call together the Parks and Rec Advisory Board agenda and meeting for Thursday, February 21st. We'll call this meeting to order and call roll. Dave Shannon.
Here.
Joey Costanza.
Here.
Phil Cranmer.
Here.
Myself. Missing for the moment Ron, Sean Michael, and Jason.
Mr. Chairman, Sean Michael Janssen has reached out to me, and he is delayed coming from baseball.
Awesome.
Have not heard from Mr. Alberici or Mr. Hill.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Next item of business is we'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, God bless you. Pursuant to our agenda, the next item of business, item 3, is the approval of the previous meeting agenda, January 17th.
The approval of tonight's meeting agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry, today's meeting agenda. Any comments about today's agenda? Right on time. If there are no comments about today's agenda, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of today's meeting agenda, and I will note that Jason has arrived, so thank you for being here, Jason.
So make a motion to approve. I'll second that motion.
Motion by Cranmer, second by Shannon for approval of the meeting agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Item 4, the approval of the minutes from the January 17th meeting, so dutifully put in front of you by Mr. Craig and Tom.
I'd like to thank Jason for approving me as the secretary again before I say. Anyway, you're welcome. Thank you.
Glad to have you back. You're doing a great job.
Outstanding.
Keep it up.
Outstanding.
Keep it up. If there are no comments on the agenda or any changes, I entertain a motion for approval of the meeting agendas from last month.
Motion to approve last meetings.
Motion by Costanza.
Second.
it.
Second by Alberici. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Item number 5 tonight is public comment. Public comment is a time for citizens to share information with the Parks and Rec Advisory Board and to provide input and opinions on any matter that is not scheduled for its own public hearing during today's meeting. Mr. Craig, do we have public comment today?
We do not have public comment related to items that are not on today's agenda.
Okay, good. Thank you. So that being the case, maybe we should make a modest adjustment to the agenda and move the unfinished business of the citywide master plan to the next item so we can take care of our citizens who have come out and joined us today and give us their comment. And then
If I may, Mr. Chairman, to our guests in the audience, we are delighted that you took the time to come here. The city does have a requirement that if you intend to speak, that you please fill out a yellow comment card and give them to me. The city requirements that you give it before the item is presented. So I will give you guys a moment if you wish to speak. And
Do we have a time allotment for each individual comment? Or
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay.
I have a timer here on my watch. I don't know where the control is for that.
Gotcha.
Nor do we know how to use it.
Not a problem. And we'll be
I suspect there's an on-off switch
somewhere.
I haven't
Yeah.
been trained.
That's for Sudi to know, and it's not your pay grade. Note in the record that Sean Michael Janssen is now joining the Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting, making number 6 this evening. Sean Michael, thanks for coming.
Do you want to go ahead and do the committee report?
Yeah, so let's call the first public comment on the,
Or do you want to do the committee reports and keep the meeting
no, I figured we'll,
as you wish?
yeah, no, we'll get to the public comments on the plan, and then we'll come back to our normal business.
Okay. The next item then, unfinished business, is a discussion on the citywide master plan. I'd like to call up Mr. Steve Provo with Barge Design Solutions, the consultant on the project.
Thank you, Jim. Good to see you all again. I'm Steve Provo with Barge Design Solutions, and we have had the pleasure of working with the City of Milton and the park staff on developing a park system comprehensive plan. And what I'm presenting to you today is the draft final of that plan. And this is an overview. It's a very detailed plan, and I want to give you the highlights of what the process we went through and some of the outcomes that came from that process. The team is Barge Design Solutions with the City of Milton, and this has been a close collaboration between us and the city staff. We're also working with sub-consultants called PROS Consulting, which is a national firm that does park system planning across the country, and we frequently team with them, and ETC Institute. ETC Institute put together and administered the survey, the community survey, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. The process that we went through in general had 5 pieces to it, which included research and analysis, community outreach, needs assessment, development plan and recommendations, and the implementation plan. Of course, there's many components to each one of those, but those are in general the process we went through, and I'm going to give you a little highlight on each of the pieces of that. The first part under research and analysis, the main thing I wanted to show you was simply the part of the demographics had to do with estimating what your population is going to be in the next 5 and 10 years of this plan period, because we utilize that data to determine recommendations for growth over that 10-year time frame. And what the data is showing for that is that you're likely to experience a growth of about 22% in the next 10 years. And that's a robust growth. On the community outreach, what we did is several pieces. We talked to a number of focus groups. First of all, groups of people that have a stake in individual parks or in the park system, and got input from those folks and utilized that input to help steer how we garner information from the public at large. So we had 11 discussions for these focus groups over a course of 2 days, with 56 people giving us information about what their knowledge of the parks. And that information had to do with, trails, where to acquire land, what kind of amenities are needed, what kind of park equity is either happening or not happening across the park system. And we utilize that to help formulate the questions we put to the public and also to begin to build the community survey. We had 2 public workshops. These were extremely well-attended workshops. We presented information about our assessments and an inventory of the parks, and then got information back from the community. And we learned priorities from the community, including interest in enhancement of Birmingham Park, trails in and between the parks, acquiring new parkland, a focus on the need for new sports fields, and an interest in multi-generational indoor center, kind of like a rec center, but for multi-age groups. We used the data we got from the public to develop a series of questions that we sent out to 3,000 households in Milton. And our goal was to get at least 400 of those back so we could have a statistically valid survey. We got well over that, almost 15% return, which was great. So we have a 95% confidence in the information we got that we can use to balance what we heard in public meetings, focus groups, and cards that people filled out. Some of the things that we learned was 85% of households do utilize the trail systems in Milton. 91% of people in the city use parks in and around Milton. Not all of them necessarily city parks, but they use parks. That's high. 91% rate the condition of Milton's parks as excellent or good, and this was a theme we heard frequently. People told us what they'd like to see different, but people are in this community are happy with their parks. And then 21% participated in programs. That's a little low compared to national average, but we have recommendations for that in the plan, how to bring that up. These are the kinds of needs that were expressed in the percentages that went with them. A lot of it had to do with trails, walking, hiking, and biking trails throughout the city and inside of parks. The need for large community parks as well as small neighborhood parks in the city of Milton. And then a lot of people are interested in natural areas and preserving natural areas throughout the city, either existing parks or acquiring land. And then we also ask, after we ask people what kind of stuff you want, we also ask, what are you willing to pay for? Because sometimes those are two different answers. And some of them were in alignment. So number one, they are willing to pay for enhance the trail systems throughout the city. They also want to enhance existing parks with upgraded and new facilities. They want to enhance Birmingham Park, acquire new parkland in underserved areas, and enhance Providence Park. This is how the allocation looked. We asked people if they had, we gave them $100, how would you allocate it for uses in parks? And these are the answers that we got. The top answers that were not other had to do with acquiring and developing walking and biking trails, followed second by maintaining and improving the existing parks. There is a rank of other that is fairly high. That was about 20 different comments that we got. Every single one of them was different. One of them, we had 2 people who wanted dog parks, but otherwise we had 20 different answers, some of them having not much to do with parks. Some people wanted to fix traffic or reduce taxes. We also specifically asked about Birmingham Park. It's 208 acres, your biggest park in the city, and so we wanted to know how people felt about that and what they'd like to see done out there. And it was very interesting that we got a very balanced response between people who would like passive elements only or no development in the park, and people who would like a mix of passive and active development in the park or completely active uses in the park. And when you add those together, they're both equal 45% responses. So there's an equal division around people who want little or no development in that park or moderately and heavily developed. When we look at the responses that we get from the community, both in public meetings and through the surveys, we take that information and we weight it between qualitative and quantitative data. And we put most of the emphasis on the quantitative that we can put numbers to. And then we have a system for developing how to balance out the qualitative. And the qualitative is basically our assessments, the demographics and trends, but also community input. And so that ends up being about a 70% weight on quantitative input on data and a 30% weight on qualitative. And what it does is it helps us prioritize what we heard from the public. And I'm going to go through with you high, medium, and low priorities that we heard from the public for facilities and programs. So for facilities, the items that ranked high, this is facilities and amenities. Again, hiking, biking, and walking trails, large community parks, natural areas, small neighborhood parks, the multi-generational rec center, off-leash dog parks, boating and fishing, outdoor tennis, pavilions and picnic shelters, facilities and amenities for special needs, and outdoor swimming pools or water parks. At the medium ranking, we saw playgrounds and multi-use rectangular fields, soccer, lacrosse, football, athletic fields. And then these came in low. It doesn't mean they're not desired. They just came in lower than some of the others. We've got indoor sports fields, indoor tennis, indoor basketball, outdoor basketball, youth baseball and softball fields, equestrian facilities, sand volleyball courts, skate parks, and adult softball fields. So the priority rankings for programs, these are like classes or other programs that are run through the park system. What we got in high was, again, focused on walking, jogging, and biking is adult fitness and wellness. This is called out separately from other adult fitness and wellness programs that also ranked high in this community. Nature programs, visiting parks, just going to parks for leisure, sports, youth sports, outdoor recreation and adventure, programs including fishing and socialization with dogs. Also, there were a lot of high returns. Also on the high ranking was swimming programs, learn to swim, fitness, and swim teams, and tennis programs, youth out-of-school programs, senior adult programs, recreation experiences, and for individuals with special needs, and also picnicking. And then medium ranking is special events. This is community events like festivals or concerts, adult arts and crafts programs, youth fitness and wellness programs, and youth arts and crafts programs. Now, some of these we mark with asterisks to show you that these are things that people want. The city doesn't necessarily currently have facilities for those to happen, or at least not best practices facilities for those to happen in. The programs that ranked low, but again, still desired by the community, are gymnastics and cheerleading, equestrian programs, preschool programs, adult and youth drama and performing arts programs, and martial arts programs. That's some of the data that we got from the public input. What we do with this information is we begin to build a needs assessment to determine what the city will want to grow into over the next 10 years. And the way we do that is we look at the total developed acreage of the city and the undeveloped acreage of the city and compare that to your current population and your expected growth population. And this becomes important information because we will use it to create what we call a level of service. Level of service is a recommended amount of park acreage or facilities per 1,000 population. So these numbers are critical for that. You can see that you have a lot of undeveloped parkland that is potentially available for development. It's 400 acres. Half of that is in Birmingham Park, but then also in that is the Milton Country Club, 132 acres, and Providence Park is almost 42 acres. So we utilize that information to determine that what we recommend for acreage level of service is a 12.5 acres per 1,000 over the next 10 years. And what that will mean is based on where your population is growing to in 10 years, you will be in need of 117 additional acres. Currently, you're based on these numbers, you're 15 acres low. So this number is used to calculate budgets and cost that is in the implementation portion of the document plan. The other thing we look at for level of service is geographic distribution of the parks, and one of the tools we use for that is what we call a gap analysis map. This map shows you all of the parks that are in the city, and then each of them has a service area that corresponds to the type of park that is there. So the service area is an area either of a quarter mile, half a mile, or a mile radius around that park as to what impact it has on the community. And this graphically lets us see very quickly what parts of the city are not being served by your existing park system. And you can see that the biggest gaps are in the southwest and somewhat in the southeast, and a little bit to the northeast. Your population growth is in the south part of the city. So with the needs assessment in place and feedback from the public, we create a 10-year recommendation plan. And I'm going to give you an overview of what those recommendations are. They're detailed in the document, but in general, they fall into these categories. Land acquisition, as I just pointed out in the level of service, we recommend acquiring 117 acres. This process has already started. There's land that has been purchased at Lackey Road to start adding to the park system. We do point out that the land should be in the southeast and southwestern portions, and the greatest need is for community parks and neighborhood parks. It should also be pointed out that there is a need for sport fields, so that could possibly happen in the community parks. New parks and facilities, we saw a need for parks that have both active and passive recreation in them. Community parks can serve that. A multi-generational indoor facility, and probably the number one thing that was mentioned the most by the community is trails and greenways. And then we also look at improvements to your existing and undeveloped park acreage. On Birmingham Park, like I mentioned, this is over 200 acres. It's the city's biggest park. We do outline the possibilities and options that could happen in Birmingham Park based on the input we got from the public. A lot of the community is not interested in seeing that developed at this time. So we outline a process for how it could be developed if it were to be. And at this point, we are not recommending development to that park. We also look at Providence Park. We recommended a master planning process. That's been completed. And with that master plan in place, this is one of your top priorities for implementation of new park facilities. We're also recommending park master plans for the Milton Country Club site. That is in progress now. And also Mayfield Lake Park and Mayfield Road Park. In programs and services, our document, our plan includes a method and process for the park department to classify their services and to perform a cost recovery goals analysis. And so that's in place for them to utilize. And so the recommendation in this portion of it is to implement that and also to add recreation staff as the park system grows. The park staff and budget is adequate currently, but it won't be soon with the growth of the city and the recommendations that are required to make this park system grow. In operations, we did analyze and assess the way the park system is operated. The maintenance is currently contracted out. We did an assessment of the costs and what they're doing for the city and learned that the costs are in line with best practices, so that's good news. The recommendation is to continually do that, go back and reassess and make sure that what is being done matches best practices and the current costs for those. There are strong maintenance standards in place, and we also recommend creating work plans based on those maintenance standards that are in place. The capital improvements plan spells out a budget and a time frame for the budget. I'm not going to go through the details of all of that today, but in general, what we do show in the plan is capital improvement plan funding options and describe what those options are and how they could be utilized by the city to implement the recommendations in the plan. And they include grants and foundations, park foundations, capital improvement fees, impact fees, bonds, capital funds, and partnerships. There's a lot going on in the city of Milton and a lot of demand for capital dollars. So that's one of the challenges of this plan and implementing it. But what we've seen, what we have created here is a recommendation that clearly sets out a pathway that the city council, the Parks Board, and the Park Department can utilize to implement and grow the park system over the next 10 years. And when implemented, the whole purpose of this is to improve the quality of life in Milton. I can tell you that what we learned during this process from the public and the staff and the city council is that that the park system is very important to this community, and they care a lot about it. They want to see improvements to parts of it, and they're extremely happy with what they have here, both the park system and the park department. So that is a general overview of the document that we put together. I know we've made that available to you, so if you have any questions about what I've just presented or what's in that document, I'd be happy to take your questions.
Jim, you can tell me I want to proceed, but first, Steve, thanks. This was a short review of a lengthy document and a lengthy process that all of us citizens, participants, both in the Parks and Rec Board and the community participated in, and I'm delighted to see the level of detail. I know that was a big concern of mine when we got this begun was it just a plan or was it actually a map? And it looks like a heck of a map to me. So,
good. Thank
you. Do you want to...
Mr. Chairman, at this time, would it be appropriate to invite up those people who have expressed a desire to speak?
Yeah.
Okay.
Call the first public comment, Jim, then.
Mr. Chairman, the first person called to speak is Mr. Scott Sawyer.
I'm Scott Sawyer. I live at 787 Quarterpath Lane, Milton, Georgia, 30004. I just have a few comments, and thank you, Barge, for the work you did. That's a pretty exhaustive 2-year project. And Jim, it's an amazing task to pull all this together. But I just 4 areas I was going to briefly touch on, and then I'll provide those written comments later on in more detail.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. One thing I was going to mention is I noticed, and I just read through it briefly because it's a pretty large document, but there's really not a mention of the Milton Country Club is included in the report, but the Wolf property on Ebenezer Road, which is 100 acres, is not included, I don't think, in the summary. So there might be something to include. I know it's a recent acquisition. It's such a long process, it just wasn't in there, I think, but it should be now. And the same thing for the pasture land on Freemanville and Birmingham Road, the most recent acquisition they did. So what that does is it kind of gives a big picture of things to date that have been purchased by the city, and then you got to finish the document at some time. But I think that the green space area, the bond acquisitions, should be included to date. The next thing just about green space is I think there needs to be a budget line within the report. I don't know if you guys included that. I didn't see it. For all acquisitions, for land remediation, development, operation, and maintenance. Those green space areas are going to be very expensive to remediate, to develop, to maintain in the future. And I know it's something that might be needed. Even if it's just a to be determined, a TBD might be good. But I think that's something that should be added to that. And then the last thing about the green space area, I think there should be included in the report possibly an oversight group, like a conservancy or a conservation board made up of citizens and the city to oversee the green space area, because it's different than a park. And if you look at Piedmont Park, there's a conservancy that's a partner with the city for a space like that, and it might be a next step for a park not management, but just engagement by the community that carries throughout the life of the park plan. And the last there, I was just going to comment on, and I think you had this in there somewhat, but there needs to be another budget line just for park staff. I think you're just two people, I think, maybe. And so this is a huge parks program here, even as it exists now, with the green space there. And so I can imagine there needs to be an increase in addition to the maintenance of staff to run and operate this. It's just a huge operation. I think aside from, roads, public safety, and engagement with the development, Parks and Recreation is probably the largest activity the city's engaged in now and will be for the next few years. So I think the recognition of that staffing level should be identified in a master plan that goes out 10 years.
Great.
That's all I had.
Great comments. Thanks,
Thank
Scott.
you, Scott.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much.
Hang on, Mr. Chairman, I'm just writing down some of Mr. Sawyer's comments. Mr. Sawyer, thank you. Next is Ms. Judy Birds.
Hi, my name is Judy Birds. I live at 1165 Bream Drive in Milton, Georgia. That's about a half-mile northeast of the Birmingham Crossroads. I've only had a short amount of time to try to scan the 267 pages, but a few comments. I'm very pleased to see the shift to keep Birmingham Park and preserve the very wooded nature of that park. I think we will find over time that preservation of our trees and our woods are something that is an investment that we're very pleased with as those start to disappear more and more with development. It's a beautiful park. If you haven't been there, when it stops raining finally, I hope you'll go out and enjoy it as my dog and I do. I'm pleased also that we're seeking land that will be more appropriate for an active park, hopefully closer to more dense population centers and away from the neighboring county. We don't need to build a park for Cherokee County, folks. I have to say, if you look up in the area around Birmingham Park, I think the animals outnumber us people by quite a bit. I know I'm outnumbered 3-1 in my household. As we're adding the green space bond, which I'm very pleased to see the progress of, much of that green space that I've seen, maybe not Ebenezer Road is a little bit more wooded, but Milton Park, the potential corner at Birmingham and Freemanville are much more open spaces. There aren't a lot of trees. They are more open. There'll be beautiful spaces and beautiful pastures, but they're not the heavy woods that we see in Birmingham Park, which are a treasure, I think, to be preserved. Kind of shifting gears a little bit, as I was scanning to see what did people say versus what did I see in the plans, and based on my knowledge, one of the things is that I know the Milton area has very active tennis community, but other than Milton Country Club, I did not see a lot of tennis courts. Can we squeeze them someplace on Bell Memorial Park? I go there with my dog to walk when it's raining or a little muddier, and it's pretty dead during the day. Might be good to see some tennis courts there that people could use during the day, bring a little bit more activity. There's usually a couple people at the playground and a couple of us out walking, but not a lot of activity during the weekday there that might be able to be used better. The other thing that I heard mentioned on occasion was the need for an off-leash dog park. I know in the city of Milton, before I got my yard fenced, I'd have to go up to Fowler Park in Cumming or down to Alpharetta to use their parks. I have to say I wasn't real pleased. They were kind of a muddy mess. They weren't really big enough for the big dogs. You know, we're in Milton. We have big acreage. We have big dogs. And they need some room to just run, more than the half acre or so that we might be able to provide for them. So maybe some suggestions there. Either for the short or long term, to have a place where they can go off leash and not be a threat or a danger to horse riders and equestrian riders. Perhaps the area by the, if you all have been to the Birmingham Park, the pink trail that's east of the white trail. You know, there's a trail there. Behind that is a fairly open field. The pink trail would be nice because there's some shade. It's not as well traveled as some of the other trails there. The open field would be good. You know, that fence would have to be reinforced because we don't want the dogs running after the horses or other things. So some ideas of where you might be able to fit in a dog park, and also to just based on the community, some tennis courts. So thank you all for your efforts on this. I appreciate your service.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Burt. And our final comment tonight, Mr. Brian Maloney. Currently playing the part of the Invisible Man, Mr. Brian Maloney. Okay, he has left. Mr. Gilbert, I know you didn't fill this form. You are here. I'm giving, before I turn it back over, I'm giving you a chance if you'd like to speak. Okay. All right, Mr. Chairman, that is all of our comment.
Awesome. So a couple of comments, and we'll open up the discussion. So first questions for you, Jim. I would assume that Steve's presentation is going to go to our website for the city because it's the tightest summary the summary that we've got. So I'm assuming that we'll make that available to for people who didn't get to watch this meeting live or didn't come and join us today in person.
I'm sorry, I was writing a note down. Are you referring to the presentation that was just given now?
Yeah.
I can arrange to get that put up on the city website.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I think it would be a great reference point for a number of people. Another question that I had that you could help me with, because I know I've read it, is to remind me about Mayflower Lake versus Mayflower Road Park. Because I know there's a lot of digging and talking, and they seem superimposable to me at times, and I want to be able to separate them in my mind.
It's not Mayflower. That's what brought the Pilgrims. It's Mayfield.
Mayfield, sorry.
Yes, okay.
Right.
Currently, there is a shared park on Mayfield Road that we're calling, at this point, the project simply calls it Mayfield Road Park. It's 12 acres of land that was jointly purchased between the city of Alpharetta and the city of Milton. And that is approximately, addresses, I think it's 1270, 1280, 1290 Mayfield Road, okay? Mayfield Lake Park. Hello, Coach Hill. Mayfield Road Park is, Mayfield Lake Park is not very far at all. If you know where the Jehovah's Witness Temple Church is, forgive me if I was inelegant there, but there's a parcel of 5 acres of land that is being developed by Taylor Morrison, and what he is doing right now, as you see it, he has rebuilt the dam, and thanks to all the rain, it's come back up, and he's turning that over to us as a city. There will be an additional area of 1 acre of sitting space near the lake. It'll be a city facility. It'll be something close to, directly behind it will be development, some high density, some lower density as you go further into the property. But this will be turned over as a city park.
Got it. Great. The other comment for our citizens who came today to speak, I know we gave you a short time to read it. All of us had a little bit of short time as well. Some of the comments made by you all, I know are explained in greater detail if you go diving. So the issues around staffing are buried deep in that document and projections further out. There is a facility ranking list that talks about the standards today. That's this nice little chart that I'm kind of holding on to about what do we have and what do we need. So you can go and find some of your answers are still buried in that document. I'll open it up to conversations for the rest of the Parks and Rec Board, and thank Coach Hill for joining us. You just missed a great presentation from about our 10-year park plan. So thoughts, comments, gentlemen? Something you like, something you didn't like, something you have a question about? It's a chance to, you got Steve here and Jim and.
Yeah, actually, Steve, you brought up a slide on there that had something about 21%. You said it was low and that you had plans of improving that number. I don't remember. It was a participation.
That was participation in programs. And the national benchmark for that is, I believe, 34%. And so that's not terribly far off. But it's one of the areas that the Parks Department can focus on is how to get higher participation in their programs. And we create, in the document, we show a way that that they can assess the the programs that they have and categorize those, and then also look at a cost recovery plan for how the programs are being implemented. And by implementing that plan, they can make sure that they are regularly providing the types of programs that the community is interested in. There's always going to be programs that are new and that are stable and that are kind of in decline. And so it's a way to assess those programs in that way, which programs are falling in one of those categories and may need to be improved or built up because they have a lot of interest in them, or they're in decline. And so it may be time to look at phasing that out and replacing it with a different program.
Okay. Was the 35% a goal? I know it's the national average, but is that a goal for us?
Oh, it could be higher than 34%,
could be higher than that.
But yeah, that's the national benchmark. So it's just something to compare it to.
Okay. On that point, Steve, what role do shared programming, where we share so much prior to the expiration of MOU, are you counting in the 21 just Milton and Milton, or does that include Milton crossing over to participate in Alpharetta programs, and so that the number might account for some of the.
It's a good thing for you to bring up, because it's interesting in this community that some programs, a lot of the programs are being run outside of the department. And we are looking at all of the programs that are offered by the Parks Department, the Milton Parks Department, not the Alpharetta ones. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes up the percentage that we looked at. And because of the way that they're implemented by some of them by a third party, it is a challenge for how do you steer more participation in those or not.
Got it. Great.
The size of the Parks Department today, they're doing the way they're doing it is the exact right way they should be doing it.
Good.
Steve, you mentioned 117 acres is going to be needed. Is that present day, or is that 10 years from now?
It's 10 years from now.
That's 10 years.
Your current day deficiency is only 15 acres when you take into consideration your undeveloped parkland. But one thing to keep in mind about the undeveloped parkland is that while it's a lot of acreage, it is not all appropriate for the types of facilities that are recommended by this plan. Some of it is sports fields, and they have large flat footprints. And so some of that 117 acres should be looked at as being appropriate for athletics.
Thank you.
Yep.
So that 117 need is, like, what would you say the percentage of active space versus passive, or is it all active that we need 117 acres?
It would be a mix of active and passive, and most of it would still be passive, but there is a need for spaces for more athletic fields. Right. And in the parkland, a lot of what's available today, there's not a lot of areas where we would put that in what's currently available to the city.
Another question. Just curious, and I may have missed it in the document, and Scott, you may have already seen it because I know we've talked about different things that are in there, but in regards to the request, I noticed that a high priority was trails and such. Is that something that can be accomplished? And in that number, do we have what the trails that are going to be at Providence, the trails that are currently at some of the other parks? Is this something, do we have a number that we're shooting for? And as far as, what's the ideal, or You know, I
That's
know
the-
that people are saying we want them.
Right.
Is the public aware of what we already have? And are we also counting the future parks that we already have in that?
Okay, so the first part of that question is a fair question. When we look at level of service, we look at acreage and facilities based on your population. We don't put a level of service number to trails and greenways, and the reason we don't do that is because it would change based on the density of your community. So you could have a very large geographic area with a small population, and we wouldn't be able to tell you how many miles of trails you ought to have compared to a dense town, which may have a high population but fewer miles to connect. So really the recommendation is provide trails inside of your existing parks wherever possible, preferably a loop that connects your facilities inside that park, and then also provide greenways and trail connections throughout your community. Our preference for this plan is that they connect parks. They should also connect schools and downtown areas, but our interest is that they connect the parks to each other. And that plan, there is a trails plan that the city is already pursuing.
Right.
Okay. So for everybody's clarification, because I know it's come up in a couple of discussions, trail plan, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, trail plan falls to Public Works as construction rather than sitting in Parks and Rec primarily as a place for it to be governed and managed. Is that right?
Actually, very much so. There's one small correction. We recently moved the overall trail planning process to ComDev. So Parag Agrawal is leading that effort now since Carter has left.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Other questions, comments? It's a wonderful opportunity for...
Steve, one last question I have for you.
Sure.
There was a slide in there around the implementation of the classification of services.
Right.
What exactly is that?
So it's looking at the different types of services that are provided and whether they are, we would rank them, whether they, and I don't remember the rankings off the top of my head right this second, but so I apologize for that, but they rank them in their categories of need and what the service they're providing to the community. Some of them are life safety services as opposed to lifestyle services. And so we categorize them whether or not you're learning to swim, which is a life safety service, right? And the importance of a program like that would elevate that high. And it's very unlikely that a program like that would ever be phased out. But other classes like like maybe Zumba may be popular for a while and then over time be less popular and get replaced by some other type of aerobic program. And so that has a different level of category. So categorizing those programs and then identifying what they are helps identify when or if you're going to phase them out and put something else in.
I see. Thank you.
Steve, I'm going to ask a really detailed question. Tell me about your practical application with it. So buried in there about funding sources is cost recovery programs. So are there examples of that? And you laid out kind of a template of what that would look like, how it might be applied and considered, and some consideration for there would be time and not its instantaneous switch. But is that something that you've seen done in other municipalities, and what does that look like?
So it is something that we've seen in other municipalities, and it is a area of our plan that I depend on the expertise of PROS Consulting to bring it from a national level and how to do that. So my ability to answer that question in detail is less than it would be if I had my partner, Mike Svets, here. But we've definitely have examples of it being done in different ways in different communities. So it ought to be set up to be specific to the community and the desire for charging or having fees for uses of facilities or not.
Yep, got it.
In that community.
Okay. Other questions, comments? It's been a very good discussion and a long journey. We're well into this almost a year, 8 months, few months, it's a lot. I'm just track of when we started and when we finished.
We
but-
started this in 2017.
Yeah. So it's a long process, so it's a valid document.
But there's been a great effort. When we first started discussing this a year ago, we got some very constructive feedback from citizens. And we used that to go back and relook at the process and relook at the project. And the goal here is we're working on a plan to take us at least through 2027. Mm-hmm. And so certain things you don't rush.
Yep.
You know, that's we're trying to make sure we get this right. We're trying to maximize the value of the dollars and his expertise.
So if there's no other questions, then.
I have one more.
Oh, John McIntyre.
With the sports fields, you said, obviously they need flat kind of land. What, based off of the projected growth and needs, how many acres do you think for sports fields would be necessary when we are looking either to acquire or use what we have to kind of know what we have to look for, I guess?
Right. So what we're looking at is the largest elements there are going to be your multi-purpose fields, and we will have a need for 4 multi-purpose fields and then 2 baseball fields and 5 softball fields. So the multi-purpose fields themselves, the facility is 2 acres, and then your parking can easily double that. And so we're talking about 8, 10. I have not added up what we need just for athletic fields, but we're looking at maybe 20 or 30 acres to support these facilities. Probably the higher end of that number.
Right. Jim, you said, I think I'd asked you previously, like Bell, just for reference point, is about 36 acres, is that right?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, so that has 4 baseball fields and 2 rectangles and then parking, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay.
And it doesn't use up the entire park. There's parts of it that are held for trails and with trees on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? So next steps, for those in attendance, anyone watching this evening, next steps is for us to entertain a motion to accept the report, approve the report as is presented to us, and then it would go to council at their next work session. Is that where we're headed with this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it is your decision if you wish to vote on it, that's fine. If you choose to not do so, that's fine. If you choose to vote on it, you could choose to accept it as it is. You could offer some recommendations of changes based on some of the citizen input you have here, or you could choose to reject it altogether. So the purpose here is to give a recommendation to the elected officials based as your members of the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. Did I answer your
Yep, you
question?
did.
Okay.
So if that's acceptable to members of Parks and Rec Board, I would entertain a motion to accept the report as presented and give it our approval to take forward to the City Council for the next step in the dance.
Just for consideration, I've gotten through about 3/4 of it, but not 100%. And I would be reluctant to vote in confirming what was presented until I get through the remaining 25%. My apologies. But that's just where I'm at. If everyone else, however, has gotten through it in detail, I'm happy to take a vote. I won't be able to vote for it, not having read 100% of it.
Same here. I mean, I was late getting here. I didn't hear the presentation, so I don't think it would be fair for me to vote without hearing the whole presentation.
Fair. Mm-hmm. Any comments on this side of the room?
No.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I realized I did not answer. You asked what was the next step.
Yeah.
It is currently scheduled to be presented at a city workshop on March 11th.
March 11th. Thought so. Okay. So, a couple options. We could just accept the report as it's presented to us, and the next step is staff takes it to council. We could vote to approve it as it's been presented to us and recommend it goes to council with our full approval and let the votes fall where they may. Those are probably our two options. I'm not sure there's a third. We could do nothing and just let Jim and Steve take it to council, and we could sidestep it, which I'm not a fan of doing.
Yeah.
So we'll throw that one off the table. So we're left with an opportunity to make a motion.
And you also can make recommendations of proposed changes.
Yep, could do that too as well. Thanks, Jim. So I'm open. Floor's open to ideas. Somebody wants to.
The plan is being presented to council on
March 11th.
March 11th.
Next step, it goes to them, just as Steve presented to us, same presentation, goes to them, more public, more questions. And then they'll have a chance, like we have, to incorporate comments, make changes, and then it'll come back to them formally at a council meeting, not at a workshop, for their approval, full approval of the document as our 10-year plan, because ultimately it's their decision.
Right. 11th. So it could go to council without a recommendation from this board.
Could. Yep. If nobody wants to make one, I'll make a motion. I don't do it very often, but I'll make one.
I have one question for Scott. Steve, I'm sorry.
Scott.
The acreage number that I had heard in the past for flat field space use was 60 acres.
So 60 acres for how
flat
many?
Ball fields, active play.
Well, that would depend on how many fields and you want to put on the 60 acres, but I've developed a soccer field that had regulation size, a soccer park with 5 regulation size fields and parking in 35 acres. Mm-hmm. It was jammed and we used retaining walls.
Like we did at Birmingham Park, like at Bell Memorial Park, where there's retaining walls and everything's stacked on each other.
So 60 acres potentially could hold twice as many fields depending on the configuration of the land. And it's either going to be, depending on the shape and form of the land, it could be more expensive or less expensive. The park I just referenced was more expensive because it was on slopes.
Right. The topology of this area is rolling.
That's right. Flat. So the acreage for an athletic complex is dependent on the configuration of that acreage and how many facilities you want to put on it.
And kind of as a follow-up, so we have some IGAs. When I saw that was included in the in that, the ability to get more usage out of those IGAs through partnerships. You know, I think of Hopewell. There's a rectangle field at Hopewell.
Right.
That it's not in great shape, but we don't, and so it's available, but not well used, right? If that field was turfed and lit, it would be there would be much more activity there, right? Or the ability to do more activity. Same with, even lights at some of the ones that are used. Is that a realistic short-term objective to building a new park, right?
It could be. I know that the city is currently renegotiating some of their IGAs. Jim could probably speak to that better. But it will depend on the agreement between the city and the school system on whether or not the city is willing to make the investment. But that would be a great way to do it because the land is already there. The sites do need upgrades, but it would not require new land purchases. So it would be a quick way to provide those needs.
Yeah, and that's just temporary because as soon as the population spikes, the schools are going to look for places to expand the school, thus trailers, that disappears.
Right, and so the agreements are in place for a certain amount of time, for years. enough years that the city can get their value out of the investment of improving the fields.
And one of the benefits of the table, and I know we referenced it in a draft form with the council, is it kind of identifies where are the gaps and what the needs are. So then city can make decisions on where do they want to make investments on infrastructure away from the big part of the strategic plan, but back to more tactical of what are they going to do next year.
I'm ready to go. I'd like to make a motion to accept the report and vote on it, move it to City Council.
Okay, motion by Shannon to accept the report as presented with our endorsement for it to go to City Council.
I'll second.
Second by Joey. All in favor? Or any comments? Any comments? Comments?
One comment,
Bill?
actually more of a question. Jim and Tom, are there any recommendations that you guys have or city staff have with regards to the proposal? Any adjustments that you guys would look for?
We have put in great amounts of time over the last year working to improve this. I do acknowledge, and I will probably be speaking with Steve after the meeting, I do acknowledge the point made by Mr. Sawyer that the city has very recently made a couple of purchases which were not able to be calculated into this. And I think it's a very fair statement by Mr. Sawyer. But, I mean, please take that as a compliment that your elected officials are moving quickly to acquire land when these opportunities come up. And so we've been working very hard on this. But that's the biggest thing I would suggest.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? We've got a motion and a second on the floor for acceptance and approval to move to council. Any other questions? Concerns?
I guess my question before we vote, is it possible to put the motion that with those additions? I would assume that's a fairly easy thing to do. I don't want to speak for you. Is to put in.
It depends on how we insert it. It will change the calculations, which will adjust the level of service and the recommendation for the acreage to be purchased. So it does have a ramification that ripples through the report. There could be a way of putting it in there as a in the appendix or an addendum that this is ongoing and that this has happened at this point, and keep the level of service recommendation and the calculations of acreages as they were.
Right. Because a practical matter would be, well, it may address the deficit in park land. It doesn't address the deficit in the chart of what do we need for active. And so you're
correct.
So it may be just a simple addendum of it's in progress, and it leaves the bigger note hanging out there. So I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with
That's
that.
It's going to be this document's going to be an ongoing staff revision document. So I'm good with that. Any other comments? I want to give you all a fair chance.
I mean,
it's an important document for this
I
city.
guess the only thing that I have, and I wasn't in the beginning conversations, and I know Birmingham Park is kind of, out there on its own, but in the report, it says it's the only land that the city currently owns that's suitable for development of active recreation facilities. Are the new purchases, do we know, are they going to be more for active? Are they more for passive green space kind of things, or?
To the best of my understanding, the land that was acquired from Mr. Wolf over on Lackey Road was purchased with green space bond money, and as such is committed to passive usage. The property that the city is pursuing on Birmingham and Freemanville has also been purchased with green space bond money. The city did overwhelmingly support a green space bond of $25 million, and this is the process happening. But those two particular parcels of land, as is the Milton Country Club, the former Milton Country Club, with the exception of the 7 active acres, that 132 acres is committed to be passive use.
Correct.
Did I answer your question?
Yes.
And those parks would go through their own planning process, just as we've been doing with Providence, just as we're doing Milton Country Club property. So they would have their own planning process for those large
I mean, I guess the question I have is, since we're looking at over the next 10 years, or I guess till 2027, in that it says that, it says for active and passive use for Birmingham would be the most viable option, but they're currently not recommended based on stakeholders. Does that mean for the next 9 years, wouldn't even be addressed potentially?
It means not at this time. What it doesn't speak to, and there's a line in there, and Steve put it in, which is not germane to our discussion, but any discussion of active parkland or any land being bought is all council closed-door executive session around land. So while we're not talking about in the plan buying land, there's sort of, if there's all these tables of needs of active fields, the city's got to figure out where can they buy fields. Not at this time in using Birmingham Park. Whether we revisit that topic in some time to come, that's on the table for us to revisit with the council and with the city. But I think to your point, Sean, Michael, that there is inherent in the plan and in its entirety to speak to, there's clearly recognized need for more fields. The city's going to have to do something at some time in the next 10 years to address that gap.
Okay.
Birmingham Park may not be an option today. It may be an option later, or other land may show up that is that we're not even talking about today. There's another option. So that's for the city to manage and not for me to worry about for the moment. Last call for other questions. These are great discussions. This is an important document for our city, for what we're going to tell our leaders, what they need to do for our residents. So I appreciate all the discussion. I'm not trying to cut it off. We've given Steve a little bit of opportunity to address some critical components. You guys have brought up some great topics. Citizens have given us some great input. We've got a motion on the table to accept it, approve it, and recommend it goes to council in a second. If there's no more comments, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. 7-0.
Any not voting?
Any not voting? Coach Hill. Okay, duly noted. So the motion for unfinished business in the citywide master plan moves from us to the work session with the city council currently scheduled and planned for March 11th. I thank all the citizens for coming out tonight to share your thoughts and comments with us. I would encourage you to dive deeper in this 267-page document. There's a lot of stuff that you'll find addresses some of your questions, but thanks again for coming.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Steve.
Steve, thank you very much.
Thanks to your team, too.
Yeah, it was an excellent document.
A lot. It was a lot.
We will resume our meeting with committee reports. Let's turn to Hopewell Baseball and Sean Michael.
Okay. So got the overall numbers for the spring this year is about 680 kids, which is about a 20% growth from last year. Kind of to the point of what we've been talking about today. They think that that growth will be sustainable if there are more fields. Basically,
Sean, I missed that number real quick. I was writing that.
680.
680.
Yep.
20% up.
Yeah, from last spring.
And if I may add, that tops the number that spring baseball was at in 2014 when we closed down the park.
Wow.
Yeah, they've done a great job of bringing people back to the park. They feel it's sustainable, but obviously with the fewer field spaces, I was at practice today. Only in the batting cages. The fields obviously are closed. Yep. Another point that they did raise or would like me to address was the second rectangle field, the one that has the baseball facility kind of on it.
Yes. It's technically field 1 and field 7.
Okay, so the one
Field 7.
Yeah. Field 7, they would like to see, depending on the maximization or the usage from the lacrosse people, that if there are rainouts, that they would be able to each use one field so that they could have practices, because each rainout we miss 8 to 10 teams, I think, don't get any field space, and those batting cages with 10 kids running around get kind of cramped. So that was just one concern they have. If instead of having just one or two teams, maybe, I don't know how many teams practices for lacrosse at one time, but if they could put multiple teams on one field, and then they would do the same with the baseball and put, 4 or 5 teams on there. Other than that, I mean, he's got some other bullet points, and I don't know if, from a committee standpoint, he was talking about a need for, right now, there's about 70 teams currently participating, and that includes their select teams they have as well. So obviously, it is a full boat of practice schedules. It's requested indoor facility. They need something. Right now, they do go over to a facility on Windward occasionally, but that's a private establishment that we rent out only on certain days. And he said that they were willing to do what needed to be to help out the city to get it done. And I had asked him roughly the space, and he was saying it was somewhere in the range of 4,000 to 6,000 square feet, depending on parking land. If it was put on at I guess Bell in the parking lot, that unfinished area, somewhere around there, they wouldn't need parking, but from acreage space. So when we're considering potential uses in the future. Let's see. He was talking about more fields to the point, and one of the reasons I was asking all the questions today. And he feels that if we were to double the size of the park, that we could double the size of the numbers, anywhere between 1,100 and 1,200 kids, if there was the facilities for it. Let's see. I don't even know what I wrote there. Double participation in the next 6 to 8 years. Yeah. And then also the same kind of, I think what Jason was talking about earlier with the IOG fields, if there's a potential to light them, or like Hopewell Middle, if there was better access. I know there used to be a road there. Now there's development behind it. I don't know if there's a way to still access it and put a little parking there. But for any of you that have been over to the rectangle field or the field itself, the baseball field, you have to walk down a hill, up some steps, and through the woods. And the first time I ever went, I had no idea where I was going. So it's not very easy to find.
It's dark there at night.
Yeah, it does. It does get dark at there.
Do you use that?
I've used it. I use it during All-Star season. I know right now we're trying to maximize usage there. As much as they can. Yeah. I mean, you can get to it. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's not the easiest. So he's saying, I guess from perspective of using it for games and things like that, it's not like for a practice. It's easy, but if you're trying to rotate people in and out, the parking and everything, it's not really conducive.
Could be a game day field.
What's that?
Could be a game day field, a Saturday field.
Yeah.
For some games, for some age groups.
We could conceivably come up with a way to give you guys access to the back gate.
Yeah, I think that's what he was referencing.
We've done that
Up by the
before.
left field fence.
Yes.
Yeah.
The challenge, of course, is making sure someone locks it back up when you're done.
Okay. So
The reason it gets locked is we're
Donuts?
trying to discourage, people go down onto the fields and they do donuts on the fields and tear up the grass and the irrigation system. And that has happened on multiple occasions when it gets left open.
I think the not the sticking point, but what they would like to see is to have some, because I don't think there's much parking though, or parking spaces available there.
parking.
Yeah, once you get there, even if you open that gate, there's not really places for those cars to go, I think.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, I think that was it. And then, same thing with the potential for lighting the fields, the IOGs for, using for lacrosse, or that way if they need to use in field 7 over at Bell, they could, but, just those were the thoughts there.
2 comments you want to add, Jim, for us. Remind us, Birmingham Church Field is up and live for the spring season?
Yep, they're working over there. He said they're digging ditches, putting in bleachers, I believe.
So that'll be available for spring season?
Yes.
Yep.
That's new field.
Yes.
And then speak for a second. I know we've talked around it and about it a lot. I know IGA fields are very popular, but just remind me about, and everybody who may be listening and those of us who are in the room, about lighting baseball fields and IGA fields. Because there's differences by sport, right?
Yeah.
All right. Did you want to talk about what's going on at the UMC?
Yeah, so Hopewell's working on rebuilding the batting cages, making a lot of progress on those. We're working on the irrigation system. That's an ongoing challenge. Every time they turn on the next section of water, there's leaks all over the place, and they're having to repair them. We haven't even gotten to the field yet, or found the heads. I think they're buried underneath the grass because it hasn't been used in so long. So the grass and dirt have grown over.
We're working on the parking plan.
Yes, and then we're working on the parking lot and trying to maximize spaces. But we're using the field currently. If it wasn't raining, I think they would use it tonight.
Right.
Good.
The challenges for us with lighting some of the elementary school fields, we've had some community pushback from the Birmingham Falls area, and the principal has spoken to me about it, and he's very reluctant on it because he, of course, is as we are. We're trying to maintain positive community relations. The Hopewell baseball field, we'd have to think really hard about putting lights there. It would definitely help, no question about that. But we've got those other ongoing challenges that you guys just pointed out, which is access and parking. Okay. It was if you're not familiar with that particular parcel of land, it is separated by a creek, and that's why you have to go down the steps, over a bridge, up more steps, and so that's I can understand why Hopewell Base will prefer to use the Birmingham United Methodist Church over the Hopewell Middle School field. But that still being said, as a practice facility, if Hopewell wanted to see if they could, I could perhaps provide a code lock and give you guys a code, and then we could find a way to. Okay. I'd have to get support from the Hopewell coaches to make sure that it's locked up properly.
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, his main concern is really field space. And being a coach for the last 3 years, I can attest to the PRAB spaces. When you have that, especially if it's bigger than it was before it closed down, that's it's a huge thing. And especially with the rainouts, you just don't have. I mean, we get 6 practices before the season starts, and now 3 of mine have been rained out already. I mean, and that's multiply that by 8 teams a day. They're just not getting to the field. So, and for the experience of the families that do participate, you want your son or daughter, whoever's playing, to have the practice, get better at the sport, to like it. But when they don't have that and they're just participating in the games, it kind of loses, in my opinion, some of the
wet springs
benefits.
are bad for baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah, been there. I can remember going to games with not knowing the kids on my team.
Yeah.
Because we never practiced.
Right. Yeah.
So particularly for the youngest kids who are just starting, they don't even know where to go. So
That's why baseball is a spring sport, just like lacrosse.
Yeah, I can't
Shouldn't
control.
be starting in January.
I can't control that. Can't control that.
Yeah.
Control that down the weather. Anything else, Sean Michael, for Hopewell? I appreciate the report. You guys are living some of the stressors that come with baseball.
Nope, that's pretty much
Awesome.
it.
Great. I expect that Jim will get back to you about scheduling if exploring options on the turf field. That's for staff discussion. Eagle Sticks, Jason and Joey, you want to tell us a little bit about committee report there?
They didn't have, so I talked to them early this week. They didn't have final numbers, but expected some small growth over last spring.
Great.
On the girls. Schedule comes out or just came out today for most of the rec teams, so they're there. And like everybody else on a grass field, they're just saying, hey, we're, probably not going to get on Northwestern next week even for the first couple days because of the rain. So fighting that same challenge that everybody that, it's the same. You miss about 4 of your practices out of 6 or whatever the case is.
Yep.
You're going into games on the 2nd of March with lots of unknowns.
Yep.
Or a lot more unknowns.
Got it.
But they were all seemed to be other than the fact of the weather. And if we can change that here, we probably shouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
Could be doing some other things.
No, it begs the question. It's a motivator. So I leave it the thought with you two guys. Take it back to your leaders and organization. Feed it to your council members with a big multi-purpose building with all kinds of fancy things that we've seen in buildings like that. You could do indoor practices and make things happen in small groups. And it's just another reinforcing need about why we need to keep chasing a building.
Yeah.
So that's an important aspect because I think it would maybe a little more difficult with lacrosse perhaps because of some of their drills, but baseball, certainly small drills on a bucket work really nice in a big building.
Real quick to add to that, yes, the numbers haven't come in. Jason had talked to Tim. I do know that he said that fourth graders was an increase. That's the only thing I did know, that they had a real bump in that number. I thought that was an interesting grade. Could be all the other stuff that's going on that you guys are doing. And but there was one thing that has been going on that may need to be addressed next season. A lot of the parents have been circulating, and it's only a half an hour. This is the funny thing. It's only a half an hour difference from last year, but we're practicing till 9 o'clock. That 1.5 hour has stirred up some parents, and I get it. I mean, I want to fall asleep, but that is something we might need to look at. Not obviously not now, but going into next season.
I don't know that I want the city to be setting the practice time. That's programs got to figure out how to manage their schedule around their group.
Yeah.
It's happened in baseball.
Yeah, I mean,
when the groups get big,
they're going to
the time-
9:30
The time
right now.
presses to
Yeah.
get your practices, and it's
And I think
hard.
where it hits is that I think both on the Milton and the Cambridge side, they have some of the younger kids that have accelerated and
Yep.
are on the
Sure.
older kid teams. And so you have elementary school kids at 9
Yeah.
o'clock.
Yep.
As opposed to the middle kids.
At 9 o'clock.
Which, the fifth grade
Yeah.
goes through the elementary. And I think that's where
And
a lot of that noise
and I
is
think-
coming from, and rightfully so. I mean,
And I think Jason and I think one of the things I'm hoping happens next year is that we talk about it way before the season gets started, right? Because I think that this season what happened was all of a sudden it just got laid out there.
Yeah.
And maybe there should be some understanding that, okay, you got 15 fifth graders staying up till, so I get it. So maybe just the discussion happens, and maybe it's not the time, it's just who's out there.
yeah.
Right.
No, very good point. That'll end committee reports. We'll move to new business. The only item under new business is a discussion on a proposed financial aid program from Tom McElvain. Tom, the floor is yours.
Okay, Jim and I have been tasked with, can I have mine? Sweet. Yes. Jim and I have been tasked with potentially firing up a financial aid program. This has been tossed around in the past, using grant money to fund financial aid. Well, that ended up not happening. But we still have been pushed to still try to do a financial aid program, and I've whipped up an application this week, so it's kind of late last minute here. I don't even know if Jim's seen it yet and read it. But I kind of took some of the framework and ideas that Alpharetta's program has. It's very detailed and had a lot of data in it that helped me a lot. But there's still a lot in here that, we're going to have to probably hash out and see what we want ours to be, because they have things in there that, we can change, for sure. I used the financial aid program at school, or for the reduced lunch at school, as the basic eligibility, and living in the city of Milton, of course. It keeps it simple and easy, and even if they don't have the reduced lunch, if they would qualify for the reduced lunch, we would still grant that financial aid. And then there's things like, what do we want to include? Does a family pool pass, do the parents get financial aid too on a pool pass? Do we want to have financial aid for adults? Maybe someday we have adult programming, more adult programming, Do we want to have financial aid for adults? And then how long do you want the application to last? 6 months, a year? You apply for it, and then, Pops gets a sweet job, Do we want... So, there's just a lot in here that might need editing, but, it's a first crack. It's very rough.
Question, do you see this as a document program that would replace whatever program currently contract providers might be doing in the way they're offering and this would become the deferral, you'd say, if somebody came to football, baseball, or Eagle Sticks and said, hey, I'm in a hard spot, would you direct them to the city and fill out an application, or would you leave it up to the program provider to let them decide what they want to do? Or is that still another question?
I see it as, for a Milton resident, they would come to the city potentially, and then non-residents, if the provider wanted to provide financial aid for a non-resident, it wouldn't be the responsibility of the city.
Does Hopewell?
That can be.
Does Hopewell provide something for those?
Not that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean they don't.
Historically,
all the programs are urged? Encouraged to offer financial aid.
Historically, under my watch, and I can't speak what Eagle Sticks does, but when I was there, if somebody came to us with a hardship and made a good case, we didn't go through a 7-page application. We accepted their word, and there was either a reduction or a waiver of associated fees.
So that's how Cambridge Youth, playing under the North Georgia Rec, does the same thing.
This would become much more, and as programs grow, maybe it begs that it has a little more structure and process around it rather than whoever asks first.
So I guess that's where, because I think that's where I see this, more as even to the pool, right? Hey, I had a hardship. We lost a job in the family. It's over the summer months.
Yeah.
That I see. I'm just wondering where we draw that line, right? If the providers are to the extent willing to take that on, right? And that's I think it's to some extent less rigorous for the parents, right? In going through that. That may be a better option, right? Hey, I lost my job. I'm not looking to do all this.
So let's do this, Tom, if this is okay with you. I know this meeting's gone well, and unless we want to attack it right now, why don't we agree that we'll review it individually, bring it back to next month's meeting with your questions, comments. For Tom, we'll offer some input to reshape it, how it could be implemented, and we'll give you some feedback for next month. Is that all right? Awesome.
Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment real quick that's just secondary to this. Someone asked me about lacrosse. I'm sure it's the same way with baseball. And what do you do when someone can't afford to play that sport? That is I had never thought about. It costs quite a bit to play sports.
Sure does.
So good for you, Tom, for putting that in. Because we'll look at it and ask questions.
Okay. So it's on your to-do list. I'll remind everybody, but we'll come next month to talk about financial aid. Although there was nothing listed on other business.
I'll put it on unfinished
business, correct. Well, there was nothing listed under other business. Jim reminded me at the start of the meeting something at least one of us probably not familiar with, and that is that there is, for Sean Michaels, new members of our board, there's actually modest compensation remuneration for your participation at your choice for attending meetings. The City of Milton has a program for all of their volunteer boards to pay a modest sum for your time to come, and there's paperwork that we need to get to you so you can make your decision. I want to say it's $50 a meeting.
It's $50. We give you the paperwork to sign up, or also the paperwork if you choose to just waive it. It's entirely a personal, private decision. It is fully funded for all members of all the city's recognized boards. And my apologies to you that it literally, it dawned on me when I was teasing you about you're being
getting
late.
docked. So the light bulb went off. So
and certainly, if you choose to get out, I will arrange for retroactive to your involvement.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, awesome.
Is anyone else that
Everybody
all the rest
else is
of you
good
knew
with their
about that, right?
paperwork on that front?
Okay, all right.
Okay, good.
Thank you. My apologies again, short Michael.
No problem. It's been a great meeting. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, can we do a couple of brief staff report
Yes,
items? Okay.
fire away.
Do want to let you know that the football RFP, they were due today. We received one response, and I have not yet had a chance to review it, but we received a response from the North Atlanta Football League, which is the program out of Alpharetta. Okay. Also, today, a couple weeks ago, we received the data from the City of Alpharetta for FY18 for our MOU fee. And young Ryan labored through the data, and we do have a slightly lower number than last year. This year's settlement will be $452,098, as compared to last year's, which was over $461,000. But through auditing process, Ryan found 27 people that were erroneously listed as Milton residents, and he saved the city $2,200.
He paid for a whole week of his internship, or a whole month of his internship. That's awesome.
Good.
Okay.
The other thing I noticed in the paper, since we're closing up reports, is the Hall of Fame was posted. Is you're in the paper recently? How is?
I recently got 4 nominations.
Wow!
You didn't even tell me.
Saving it for the meeting.
We got 4 nominations, Jim.
Thanks, Tom.
I told you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was this week. It was early this week.
Next step in there is
We have to vet them and then present them to you guys sometime in the next
couple of months.
April,
Yeah.
May timeframe.
Great. That's awesome.
Awesome. Great.
All right.
Awesome. We put a lot of work in. Yeah. Thanks, Phil.
All right. One thing for me, Camp Joyful Souls registration opened last month after our last meeting. And we've got some weeks of high registration already. Typically, I start filling up weeks in May. I have 1 week with 24 or 25 out of 30 already. Most of them came in the first 4 or 5 days, but I'm still getting one here and there trickling in. So it's looking good. And usually the word gets out in April, May, and that's when people start rushing to fill in. So it's looking good right now.
Great.
That's
Will Tim help with that again? Football program?
I wouldn't count on it.
No. Okay. I will tell you, I did hear people loved that they were there. So yeah.
It was both years they did it, probably the best field trip we had.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We can invite them.
Yeah.
And a new provider
It's
might
not a
pick
bad
up.
idea.
Right.
It's not a bad idea.
A new provider to be named later may pick up some interest in doing something too. So there's
Yeah.
who knows where that goes, or other providers. I mean, that's another whole avenue.
Yes, be a good way to connect with them.
I want to thank everybody.
I wanted to ask a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Just on the wall, I saw that the bid closes the 7th, the lacrosse wall. Is that correct?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head when the bid closes, but it is open, it's out there, and it has gathered interest. So I'm pretty confident that's going to move forward.
Awesome.
Also, the shade structures, we've completed the second round of bidding. We've selected a vendor, but we've made the decision we're not going to start that work until after spring baseball is over. Spring baseball and lacrosse is over.
Oh, that's a good decision. Yes.
Great
Those
sense.
guys out there doing stuff on a Saturday afternoon when there's
Yeah.
thousands of people walking
Not a
in
good
and out.
idea. I want to thank everybody again for time and energy listening to the Parks Plan today. This document, I really feel confident for our board and for the city, sets a really nice strategic direction. And I also want to remind all of us and anyone listening in council that it was approved 6-1. So that's an important.
I put 6-0-1.
6-1 in 6-0-1. Correct.
Okay.
So that's fine. Anything else? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Jason, seconded by Coach Chill. All in favor?
Aye.
So noted, and meeting ended at 8:05.